Well, how do you do, buckaroos? This is Joe Layden of Cowboys and Indians magazine, and I can't begin to tell you how happy I am today to be talking with the great Walter Hill, director of such outstanding westerns as Long Riders, Geronimo, Broken Trail, and now he has got another terrific western coming out, A Dollar for the Dead. And I'm not just saying this because he's listening right now. I've already seen the film, and it's really my favorite Western in a long time, too long a time, really. Because Walter and I go way back because I was an assistant unit publicist on his first film, Hard Times, which was shot in my beloved hometown of New Orleans, where I learned two things. One, Walter's a great guy and a great conversationalist. And two, I never want to be a publicist because that is a backbreaking job, and worse, you have to deal with people like me. Walter, very glad to see you again. You really like you some westerns, huh?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of blood and whiskey under the bridge since we've last talked, but it's good to hear your voice, and I'm happy to be here for Dead for a Dollar, and happy to discuss it.
Now you dedicated to the great Bud Betticker, another great director of westerns, and I remember years ago talking to Mr. Betticker about his movies, and he said that a lot of times the nominal hero and the nominal hero of the piece were actually, interchangeable, that you could have had either actor play either role. He pointed out in particular the Tall T, where, you could have had Randolph Scott and Richard Boone play roles. Were you looking for that kind of interchangeability here?
Well, first let me say that the memorial statement for Bud and I were friendly. I got to know him towards the latter part of his life. I, of course, had admired his work and knew his work. I knew it from the time I was a kid, really, and I went to the movies. And when I get this film done and pretty well edited, I don't know, I was just sitting there one day and I said, Bud would have liked this movie. It's this is throwing myself on the side of the gods, but it's kind of like one of his in many ways. It's a small story set in an isolated place. The debates are almost purely ethical and moral, and right be done. Although right can be complicated and difficult to get to with many questions. So I thought Bud would have liked this. Also, there's the other thing about Bud's films in that cycle that he did with Randolph Scott, and that is as somebody has pointed out, they're kind of like floating poker games where there's lots of negotiating and bluffing and back and forth. And our film, how do I put this, uses that technique. So I thought Bud would probably have liked the movie, and I think we should all understand. I feel very strongly about this, that we all kind of stand on each other's shoulders and hold hands with storytellers of the past. This idea that you invent something whole cloth is silly, and the main plot line of this goes back to Homer, for God's sakes, and that's 2,600 years or something like that.
That's even older than I am, Walter. That's amazing.
How, Joe? Anyway, Bud, as I say, it's more of a testament to his films than my friendship with him. And so that's really how all that happened. And I have to say that although very few people have seen Dead for a Dollar, almost everyone that's seen it has mentioned in a positive way the salute to Bud. He's not as remembered as much as he should be, but he is remembered, and people like that kind of reference, I think.
One of the many things I enjoyed about this movie, and this may seem like a small thing, but this is something I can think of as maybe not necessarily, exclusively a Bud Betticker touch, but I could see Randolph Scott doing this in a Western. And I don't want to spill any beans here, but in the midst of the final shootout, a minor character shows up, and your hero says, "What are you doing here? Get out of here! just get out of here!" And the guy says, "Thank you very much," and gets out of there. I mean, Kristoff Waltz's character, the bounty hunter, says, you don't really play a role in this. I don't care if you're working for the bad guy. Just get out of here. And I laughed out loud, I have to say, watching this. And yeah, that's what a Bud Betticker hero would do, and I think what a Walter Hill hero would do.
Well, thank you. I actually used the same trope in the second movie I did, The Driver. Sends the kid home, who was actually quite a bit more involved. But
Brother O'Neill just says, "Hit the road."
It's certainly a grace note for the character. It's an attempt at a grace note for the character so we fully and more completely understand that he is simply more than a revenger, a killer, a bloodthirsty man. He's not. He's fully prepared to go the distance when the situation requires it, but he does his best to avoid that kind of confrontation, and he's not out to harm people that are not involved or peripherally involved. It's a grace note.
Yes, I like it.
And I'm glad you noted it.
Now, also, I like the fact that fairly early on, and throughout the film, but fairly early on, you're using wipes and you're using fade outs. And it's almost your way of saying, okay, this isn't going to be a warp speed movie. This is going to be a story that's not going to be boring. It's not even going to be leisurely, but it's going to take its time, like an old-fashioned Western. And I'm wondering, A, did you do that as, sort of prepare the audience? But B, do you like those old-fashioned cinematic storytelling devices?
Well, I certainly like them when I believe they're appropriate. I've used wipes a long time, which are considerably out of favor. And deep dissolves and fades are kind of a bit out of favor. I mean, it depends on the story. But you're quite right. I wanted to set the pace of this at a leisurely, I don't know if I would use that word, but I definitely wanted to take the full measure of time. And it's not, we're not doing a run and gun thing here. We're establishing characters that have rather complicated points of view, and we're spinning the bottle. We never know quite who we're going to look at here, and everybody's got a surprise. So we we have to take time to deal with that. And the movie is, although it meets the, I suppose the standards of Western action, in terms of its finality and all that, but it's essentially a dramatic dialogue film.
Now, when you were writing it, did you have specific actors in mind? Were you thinking of Kristoff Waltz? Were you thinking of Willem Dafoe, or did you just write and then cast?
It all kind of evolved. It all started. You of all people will appreciate this. It all started. I was doing some research, reading up on some parts about the history of the West in Oklahoma and all that. And I ran across this character, Chris Madson. And Chris Madson was, he was born in Denmark. As a very young man, he fought in the Danish army against, in the Prussian War. He then left Denmark, joined the French Foreign Legion, did a tour of duty in North Africa. He went to Marseille, caught a boat, came to America, went west, joined the army, was an Army scout, and then left the army, became a lawman and a bounty man. And he lived on till the 1940s. And I thought, it's a fascinating thing that here this immigrant Dane has this very rich history in the kind of traditional problems of the West, the establishing law and order. And then I thought, it'd be interesting if that was the departure point. Instead of having your traditional kind of big, strong Anglo kind of fella be the bounty man. I knew I wanted to do the Homeric setup. I thought that would be a good, it's not actually Chris Madson, but it would be a good model for a kid to invent a character. And then I got a quick first draft. And so happened that I was friendly with Kristoff Waltz, and I could already see that he was the right guy. I mean, that was apparent as I was writing. Anyway, I called Kristoff and sent him the script. And sometimes you send actors scripts, and I don't know quite what happens. They lose your phone number or something. But Kristoff called back, I think it was a day later or something, and basically said he'd like to do it, and when do we start? And then I had to figure out who was the proper kind of antagonist, and Willem immediately came to mind. Willem and I are old friends. We worked together.
Oh, yes.
30 some years ago, almost 40 years ago. And we've been very friendly ever since. We got along well.
Streets of Fire.
Yeah, on Streets of Fire, we got along well. And we've always wanted to work together again. And but it's, it's a funny business that way. Availability, time, circumstance, right parts. So, I mean, he's done tremendously well. He is one of our really leading lights, I think, in the thespian sweepstakes. And so I sent it to Willem, and he said he was in. He wanted to be Joe Cribbens. And he said to me several times, he wanted to be Joe Cribbens and nobody else in the, it was his favorite part of the, in the movie. And he does have a nice turn at the end, I think. Mm-hmm. But he carries his dialogue, has a sense of irony and tries to have sense of irony and fun to it. And I thought Willem did that very well.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And he does something, again, not to spill any beans, but he gets to do something that you expect expected that someone else would get to do. And he does it very well with a great send-off line. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Now, the two young Black actors you've cast.
Yes.
That's another interesting element of the film, subplot, if you will. The idea that they represent maybe not necessarily opposing views, but the idea of Black men in their time. In some ways, the Army was one of the, a pretty good deal, of making a living in a deeply segregated world. And the scene where they're in the jail, one is behind bars, the other one isn't. And one is talking about, you sold me out, you did this, and the other one is berating him for, betraying his role in the Army. First off, was that necessarily a difficult scene to write? And was that the scene you were thinking about more than anything else when you cast those two actors?
Well, Warren Burke and Brandon Scott both, I thought, did a superb job in difficult roles. Well, look, I think to go back to original design on the picture, I wanted to do a Western that touched and honored the traditional bases and set pieces, which is dangerous because you don't want to be overly cliched, but at the same time, you want to feel like you saw a Western. And also, I didn't want something that, there have been an awful lot of good Westerns, and just to do one that touches, even if you do it well, touches the proper bases, that's not good enough. It's just frozen in amber there, and they've already done those films. They don't need you to come along and do another one just because you know how to do it. So I knew that I had to bring modern elements into the story as well, and I wanted to touch upon race relations, and I wanted to touch upon the kind of proto, shall we say, feminist ideas of that time. My biggest problem was, and this is now reversing engines again, I wanted those issues, but I wanted them within the context of that time. It's very easy or tempting, I guess, to write these dilemmas in the vernacular of now, but I wanted to keep it where I thought the debates would have been in 1897. You're accurate. I mean, the Army was you see both sides of it in the two characters that of Poe and Elijah that Warren and Brandon play. To the one fella, the Army is a haven from a not exactly friendly world. He gets 3 square meals, he gets a horse, he gets a gun, he gets responsibilities, he gets paid. He's not going to get rich, but and he has a sense of, there is a sense of honor and a sense of duty to Army life. And the other fella, as Jim Crow aspects of that time become more and more apparent, he is incapable of accepting the discipline of the Army, and he refuses to submit to a servile existence. So he thinks political escape to Cuba is his choice, retreat through Mexico, and he takes with him his companion, who is the proto-feminist. And well, there you have it. I just thought those issues would spark it if I could pull it off. And that's for you to tell me. So,
well, I spoke with Warren, and who, by the way, thinks you hung the moon. Has nothing but great things to say about you. And he likened that conversation to maybe one between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I thought, well, maybe.
well, that's definitely throwing us on the high side of things.
Yeah.
But it's but it is an interesting conversation. How do we proceed in this very difficult and hostile world?
Mm-hmm.
At what point do we have to accommodate to make progress? At what point do we resist to the death? These are political decisions that have to be made, and they're not easy answers. There's no template that guides the moment. You have to have a superior political sensibility, really. And now these characters, I think, articulate the two. I mean, I always thought Poe had Warren Burke had the most difficult role in the movie to play, because he has to have multiple personalities. He's one thing to the army and within the army, that kind of stuff. And builds a relationship with his who he's been assigned to work with, and his partner in the Mexican trek, which is Max Borlund, Kristoff's character. And then he's somebody else in that relationship. He maintains his own dignity, but at the same time doesn't threaten the power relationship, because he knows that would be going too far. And then we have the personality that he displays when he's dealing with his peer, Elijah the runaway. And that's a much more forceful and strong personality that he exhibits in that situation. And you have to be credible in pulling off all these transitions and make it understandable to the audience why these transitions are there. And I thought Warren did I thought both Warren and Brandon did excellent work.
Now, you also have a very strong female character in the film.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to spill any beans, but she does something that you've always wanted a character like that to do in a situation like that. And then to top that, she plays a very active role in the final shootout. And you believe both of those scenes, because, she's very credible in the part, and the way you've set it up is very credible. So was that one of those things where, you wrote her character, wrote some of her dialogue, then kind of patted yourself on the back that day and said, hey, yeah, that was pretty good, Walter.
Well, I don't remember that, but your words are, listen, you're probably too kind, Joe, but we were very lucky to get Rachel Brosnahan to do the part. She's made a huge name for herself in the last couple of years. And she's a very gifted actress. She was drawn to the part. I articulated it to her in the sense that in the overall, I remember saying something like, Rachel, you're going to play a lot of parts and do well and all that, but most of the parts you will be asked to play, your character will be searching for love. This part, she is not looking for love. She's looking for respect. She's looking for self-respect and respect from others. And that's the key to her personality. It's not oh, poor me, I need somebody to love me. That's not it at all. She's very aware that she can handle her own life. And I think we play that very, and yet, now the danger of that, there's a high and low side to all this stuff. The danger of that is you can write a character like that and they turn out to be not very sympathetic. A little too cold, a little too brittle. But she, because she is a gifted actress, somehow went through that, and she is brittle at first, and you probably don't love her right away, but by the end of the movie, you have great respect for her and her transition, I think.
Walter, you've been very generous with your time. I appreciate it. A couple of final questions. I've sometimes talked to filmmakers who, when they're on the set someday, they're acting. I'm thinking particular situation like this, Kristoff Waltz, but it may have been somebody else who delivers a line of dialogue, and the filmmaker thinks, I didn't write it to be delivered that way, but by God, that's right. That's just right. Did you experience that, Pierre?
I've certainly experienced it a number of times in my career, where the actor will give you a line reading that's both unexpected and when you analyze it, it's probably superior to what the intention. Writing is so much to yourself, and you're talking to yourself inside your head so much, and many times you take kind of easy ways with the dialogue. It's just so hard to get it down right, and the actors, of course, look at things differently. They approach things differently, and they'll often surprise you with what they bring to it, or they don't see it the same way you do always. And I know with Kristoff, I was always trying to write a couple of lines that explained his immigration to, and he kept saying, no, let's not, we don't have to explain it. He said, there's the one moment where he says he's an American when Poe is trying to pin him down as to his origins. And Kristoff was right. We didn't need it, and it's better without it.
Finally, you've kind of let the door open for a sequel.
Well,
and I'm wondering,
a couple of people have told me that. I never really quite, I never thought about it, to tell you the truth. In an era where that's all anybody thinks about is sequels. Mm-hmm. But I mean, let's see how it does. But I will say this, Joe, and it's especially nice to say it to somebody that writes for something called Cowboys and Indians. I'd like to do some more Westerns. I love them. Be happy to do more.
We'd love to see you do it. Well, Walter, I've talked to you a few other times over the years, most memorably for 48 Hours, which is a movie I'm not sure either one of us knew at the time was going to be quite the game changer and, earth shaker that it was. But one of my favorite movies, my favorite memories of a set was Hard Times. And like I said, I was working as assistant, unit publicist. And particularly the scene in the warehouse. Ernie Anderson. Ernie Anderson. And that it was the warehouse where they shucked oysters. There's going to be a fight scene, and the place really stunk really badly. I mean, there were all these old oysters and everything. And every so often, this was part of my job. I was helping them throw, I think it was bleach on the oyster shell, so it wouldn't stink quite that badly. But there's a group shot. I've still got the picture somewhere around here, and all of us are trying to smile, but it's like, you can almost see the thought balloons. Can we get out of here, please?
Yeah.
It stinks like hell.
Well, sometimes you make these things, sacrifices must be made. And I know Bronson didn't like that place. I guess the smell was part of it. He mentioned it to me several times.
But you pulled it off. And it was one of his finest performances,
Charlie was very good in it. I always say his quality in that movie and his performance really gave me a career. Had the movie not been a success, I don't know if I would have been asked back to the party. And but the movie came out well, and it did good things for Charlie and did good things for me. And I'm still here.
And you remember your line, the first line on the script? This story has no moral.
Oh, I thought I was thinking of Dead for a Dollar. The Hard Time script.
And you've made quite a few movies where that could have been the first line in the script.
Well, it usually disguises the truth.
There you go. Thank you once again. Very good luck, because you deserve it with this film, and I hope to talk with you again on your next Western.
Thank you, Joe.